Welcome to another presentation of FormZ. And our presentation today is creating modern contemporary 3D forms using the new interface and new tools found in FormZ 7. You'll be guided through an exploratory journey in the conceptualization of a modern metro rail project, utilizing many of the new and improved modeling features in FormZ 7. As we model our own metro rail station in FormZ 7, it should be mentioned that some of the features can be found in both FormZ 7 and Bonsai 3D. Bonsai 3D is a lighter version of FormZ. It does not have all the tools and features that are in FormZ. FormZ is our flagship premium modeler. It has modeling, rendering, drafting, animation, everything you need for a complete project. Let's get started by taking a quick look at a short animation, which is just one small part of this entire project. Here we show the metro train making its way down a stretch of the Short North District, which is just north of the downtown area. Although the focus of our presentation today is primarily the modeling aspects of this project, we decided to create some animations just to show some of the additional capabilities available in FormZ 7. As you can see, you can animate cameras as we walk down our station, and we can animate objects such as having the doors open and close. You can also animate lights, materials, control parameters of objects, just about anything you want. Everything you see here is all modeled, rendered, and animated using FormZ 7. We'll begin our presentation by designing our own station to highlight the new tools and features in FormZ 7. There are just a few of the many concepts for different stations throughout the city. As I said, we'll create our own from scratch, and we'll see what we come up with. We'll also look at a few tools that can easily make some complex shapes, such as these kiosks that will be placed throughout the different stations. And the last area we'll look at is the design of the train itself. Now, we don't have time to model the entire train. However, we do have time to highlight just a few of these really neat features of FormZ 7, such as the surface analysis tools, which help us analyze the smooth, aesthetic appearance of our design with real-time visual evaluations. The Untrimmed NURBS tool, which lets you remove holes or trimmed edges from a NURBS surface and restore the surface back to its original form. The Insert Knot tool, which gives you the ability to insert controls anywhere you want on the surface without altering the surface at all. It actually adjusts the positions of the other controls to maintain the surface exactly the way you want, and we'll look at that in just a moment. There's also new faceting schemes to ultimately control the faceted representation of your smooth objects, including non-triangulated quads. There's a new vector-based hatch patterns that can be applied to any type of 2D or 3D shape, and new cross-section options that include color and hatch patterns that can be displayed in real time as you dynamically create cross-sections through your objects. And I could go on and on with all the neat features in FormZ 7. With that, let's go ahead and launch FormZ 7, and we'll begin by designing our own modern metro rail station. If you would like to see some of the basic introductory interface and drawing features of FormZ 7, I would like to invite you to watch the Discover FormZ 7 Part 1 and 2 series of presentations. Okay, we begin by placing a component on our reference plane grid to give us some sort of perspective for our station. So there he is waiting for the train to come, so we'll create a nice little contemporary station for him to protect him from the elements. So we'll begin by just creating a simple 2D shape first. Maybe use the 2D rectangle tool, draw it as a 2D shape, and create some shape like that. Now at this point I'm going to use the Move tool and move that up, maybe about 12 feet or so. And there, we have a nice little roof for him. All right, let's give this a little more curvature to it. So one of the things I love to do is just take a simple shape and convert it into a NURBS object. So I'll hit the space bar to select my favorites tool, and I'll select the Convert to NURBS tool. Now anytime I click a tool in the favorites panel here, if you're wondering where that tool is, just look over in the modeling tools over here and you'll see it's highlighted red for you. So I click on the object, now it becomes a NURBS object. So we'll go ahead and turn the controls on for that. So with the Pick tool active, I can right click on the object and show controls, and I can increase or decrease the number of controls on that object by using the NURBS Reconstruct tool. So I make that active and click on that NURBS object, and you can see in the tool options I can increase or decrease the number of controls that I want on that object. And then using the Move tool, I can just simply move these controls anywhere that I want. So let's sort of play with this a little bit here and maybe pull that down Same thing over here. Let's grab this control, bring that down just a little bit, something like that. And let's give this a little more interesting shape. So maybe grab this control and I'll slide this over here somewhere, about in that area. And there you can see, you can sort of sculpt, any type of fun shape that you want. All right. And then what I do for the rest of the station, I like to build other surfaces, then I blend the pieces together. But I would like to show that you can also blend not only to other surfaces, but to other lines and other objects. So let's see how that works. For example, let's say I just draw, I don't know, spline curve over here. All right. That's just a plain spline curve by itself, and I use the NURBS blending tool. You can see I can actually click on the edge of the NURBS surface, but then I just click on a line. And you can see that it actually blend itself and be smooth and tangent off that surface, and then I go straight to the line that's over there. So I can draw lines anywhere that I want. Now, that's not exactly what I want. That looks pretty cool, but really I want to sort of sculpt it and keep the same profile that we have on the edge of this surface over here. So let's undo a couple steps, and let's derive a new spline curve that matches that edge exactly. So I'll use the derive segment tool. Click on it right there. And of course, that's my favorites, but look, see it's highlighted right there if you're wondering where that tool is. Just simply click on the edge of that NURB surface, and we have a nice spline curve that we can use to then blend that surface to. But so let's put a little gap here. What I'm going to do is take that line, move it over just a little bit, and let's unghost the original surface that I had there previously. And now we got a nice little gap there. Maybe move this up just a little bit. And I'm going to sculpt that a little bit more. What I'll do is use the edit control tool to quickly turn controls on and off for objects if I want. And then what I'll do is grab this control and just sort of play with this spline curve to sort of get into a shape that we want. So pull it out here somewhere. All right. So we got it. Now we have a three-dimensional curve here, which is sort of matches, sort of like the profile of that original surface that it was derived from. So now what we want to do is turn the controls off for that object. We don't need those anymore. And we're going to use the blend tool again by simply selecting the blend tool, clicking the edge of this NURBS, and then click on that spline curve that's over here now. And now you can see we get a different type of transition. So I sort of like that. And we have all sorts of continuity options here to control the tangency of how it rolls off of one surface. Now there really isn't any continuity options when you're blending it with a curve. It just goes straight to that curve. All right. So I sort of like that shape. Let's go ahead and go with that. Let's make a copy of that. So I'll use the move tool and maybe select that nice surface there, snap it to the end point. So I now have those two lined up perfectly. And we have a little gap there that we got to fill. So, well, that's easy to fill, right? Just use the blend tool again. So using the blend tool, I'm going to click on the two edges of both of these NURBS surfaces. And you can see it does apply some sort of smoothing to that. Now, the smoothing looks sort of cool. It's a very soft, rolling type tangency there. But really, I want something a little more sharp, hard-edged along there. So what I'm going to do is modify the continuity of the first edge and make that a positional. And it just goes straight off of that edge. And we'll do the same thing over here. Make the second edge a positional continuity also. So now it goes straight from one edge to the other. So there's no tangency with the existing object. So a nice, very sharp edge there. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I sort of like that little scalloped look to that station. All right, let's maybe repeat that scallop section a couple times. So I'll use the move tool once again. Hold the shift key to pick both of those objects, and then I'll just sort of move and copy those and snap those right onto the endpoints to make sure those are lined up exactly. All right, that's coming along pretty good. Now for the other side of the station, I want to maintain some kind of symmetry here. So if I take this shape, I want to get this over to the other side, but I want to mirror it over. So I'll use the mirror tool. Here it is right there, mirror. We got the copy option on, so I click that mirror. Click that surface. I want to mirror it over. I don't know where the center of the station is, and it doesn't really matter because I'll just sort of click anywhere. Just make sure my 2 points that I click are right on the guideline there, so I know it's mirroring in the x-axis direction, and so we mirrored it properly over. Then I'll just simply move it into the position that I want. So I'll just grab it by the endpoint, snap it onto the endpoint over there, and there we go. So there's our station. We need to fill in this area, so we can look at another tool in FormZ 7 beta, which is the NURBS attach. So instead of blending, the blending will create a brand new surface that blends between the two objects, whereas the NURBS attach is taking the edge of one surface and just sort of attaching or stretching it to match the edge of something else. This is great for filling in gaps. Like if there was a gap between these two, I could actually attach by stretching the one surface to make sure it matches perfectly. So in this case, you can see if I click on the edge of this NURBS, click on the edge of that one, it'll take this first one and stretch that edge so it matches with this edge. Now there's some twisting going on there, and if you ever see that happening, real easy to fix. Just clicking this option right here, reverse edge orientation. Now, because we mirrored the surface, it's probably going the opposite direction, and so it twisted it. So to untwist it, just turn that option on and it'll untwist one of the edges for you. Okay, so we have a nice little attachment of that NURB surface by stretching it to the edge over here. And if you look at this from a side view, you can see it is applying some tangential continuity as it rolls into the surface over here. And that's really not what we want. We got a sharp edge here, so let's maintain that same look in this area. So we'll change the continuity to be positional, so we get a very sharp edge there now. All right, that's coming along pretty good. Let's see, what do we need to do next? Well, let's sort of conceptualize where the glass is. So we'll go in and take a transparent material, apply that to these objects over here. Maybe that's our glass. I don't know, or maybe we want this to be the glass, and we can have this the solid area. I don't know, haven't quite decided yet. Let's make this glass for now. We can always change that later if we want. All right, we need to have glass or in this area. So what we need to do is sort of fill in the boundary of the edge of the surface here. Now, how can we do that? Really neat tool for that. There's a cap tool. Cap tool allows you to click on a bunch of edges and it'll fill in that boundary with a surface. All right, so we need an extra edge here to sort of fill in that boundary. So I'll just select the vector line tool. I'll click on the edge point over here, click on the end of the surface over there, and there's our vector line. Now with the cap tool, what I can do is just start clicking on a bunch of edges. And once I have enough edges where it recognizes a closed loop type boundary, it'll automatically fill that area in for me. So I click on those two edges and it recognizes that as a closed boundary. So there, it automatically caps that surface for me, or that boundary for me. And you can see it is adding some sort of bulge to that, and you can see that there's sort of a tension that you can apply by increasing or decreasing the bulge slider to be able to increase or decrease the amount of tangency as that cap surface is deriving itself off of the existing edges of those objects. Okay, now that's not quite exactly what we want. Actually, we want something that maybe is a little more flat, so we'll use the minimal surface option. So now it doesn't apply any type of tangency or bulge to that surface as it's filling in that boundary. So let's apply a transparent material for that, make it glass, and that looks pretty good for now. Okay, so that is conceptualized for the glass in that area. Let's do the same thing over here. Just simply select the vector line tool to sort of add a little extra vector line there to help us out with the cap tool, so that the cap tool knows that we can just simply select all these edges. And it really doesn't matter what you click on. It can be the edge of objects. It can be just a line by itself. And once it recognizes that closed boundary, it'll fill it in for you. All right, our station's coming along here. It looks pretty good. We have a lot of surface area on the roof in this part of our station. So we got light coming in from this window and this window over here. We do have a sun position palette, so you can analyze shadows in real time. Actually, we showed that in Discover FormZ 7 Part 2. So if you want to go back, you can see all the fun stuff that you can do with that. But we're just going to go ahead and decide to put a skylight in this area of our station to make sure we're getting enough light in that area. So let's see how we can do that. Well, what I did was I created a 2D shape like we have here. This is the vector line spline curve. And then what I'm going to do is take that 2D shape that I've drawn and project it right onto the object right here, the surface. So there's a project curve tool, which is right here. And I simply click on the object, and then I click, well, the shape that I want to project, and then I click on my object, which is the surface, and it projects that shape onto that surface. You can see it matches perfectly right to the curvature of that existing object that I have there. Now let's move that a little bit. Use the move tool and simply move that up a couple feet maybe, and there's the roof of our skylight. Now notice that it did take that curve and it is projected. We have a non-planar boundary there, and we do need to fill that in, and we know how to do that now, right? Just simply use the cap tool, and we can go in there and just start picking all the edges of that, and it fills in that area. Now, if this is the roof of the skylight, we need some glass in here. We need to sort of transition sort of the outside molding off of the roof surface here into the top of the skylight here. So how could we do that? Well, what I'm going to do is unghost the shape that I used earlier, and then we use the offset outline tool to create an offset of that a little bit larger, maybe a couple feet, something like that maybe. I'm going to delete that original profile. We don't need that anymore. And then what I'm going to do is take that profile and using the slice tool. We talked a lot about the surface splitting and slicing tools and Discover FormZ 7 Part 1. So if you watch that one, we talk about these tools. But here I'm just going to go ahead and use it. We use slice. We just simply take the object, click on our profile, and the profile slices right through and cuts a hole in there for us. So we can delete the original profile. We can delete the sliced section that's in the middle there because we don't want that. And we end up with just that outside section. So we use that to cut the profile. And you can see it's a little bit larger than the original skylight shape. Okay, so now what we need to do is create a nice transition that goes from the edge of this opening that's in this object up into the top of the skylight surface that we have. A real neat tool for doing that is right here. We'll be talking about a few more of these in this presentation. Here we talked about the cap and the project curve. Here's one. Tangent loft. This lofts between any two objects. It can be a series of cross sections. It can be just any two edges of any objects. Whatever you click on, it'll try to loft between those two. So you can see here, if I move my cursor, I can click just an edge or move it inside the boundary. It'll highlight the whole outline for me of that opening, and I click on that. And then if I go up here to this object, you can see I can click on the object, and of course it's going to use that outside boundary of that surface as the second profile, and it just sort of lofts from the outline of the opening into the top of that object. So just click on two things and it'll try to loft between those two objects for you. Pretty cool. Now it does go straight from the one edge to the other. If you want to make it smooth, nice transition flowing into that existing surface that's there. Of course, there are the tangency options over here to turn on. So we can make it tangent. So you can see now it's going to curve and sort of flow better into that existing surface. And you can increase or decrease the magnitude of that tangency also. With that, let's bring the top of the skylight back, and we can make this area glass if we want, or I don't know, maybe we'll make this area the glass, I don't know, and make that the solid roof. And of course there's a thicken tool to give that thickness if we want, but I think that's a good way to quickly conceptualize that skylight for now. We can always give it more detail later, and there we go. Let's add another skylight here since we're adding skylights. No 3D contemporary modern design would be complete without some kind of geodesic dome type object, right? So let's go ahead and maybe put a nice little geodesic dome up on top of this area for a nice little skylight. Real easy to do in FormZ 7. There is a spherical tool which allows us to create a whole variety of different types of spherical type objects. So you can create dodecahedrons, soccer balls, geodesic spheres, whatever you want. List goes on and on. All sorts of parameters for these two. So let's go ahead and create one here. Maybe give it a certain radius, something like that maybe. And there we go. Now I want to sort of reshape this a bit here. So what we'll do is we'll look at another neat tool in FormZ 7 which allows us to transform, move, rotate, and scale this object all in one single tool. And that's located right here in the transform tool. So I click on that, and when I click on the object, there's different scaling options we can choose for that. I'm going to do some non-uniform scaling, so I chose that option. And now you can see there's one widget for the object, and I can move, rotate, scale, everything I want within that one single control. So now what I'm going to do is grab maybe this top arrow, and I'm going to scale that object a little bit, maybe in this direction. Let's scale this object a little bit in that direction. Just sort of have fun with that shape, make it whatever you want. I can grab the X, Y, or Z guidelines here. You can see I can move it in the X, Y, or Z direction. I can always type in numbers at any time, so you can be as numerically accurate as you want. Or of course, you can just eyeball it if you want also. You can type in numbers. And there's the rings there, so we can go in and rotate it any direction we need, in the X, Y, or Z direction. And it's just a real neat tool to be able to do all those transformations all within a single function there. All right, so I think it looks pretty good for our geodesic dome in there. So now what we're going to do is we need to sort of split the dome with that surface that's there, and that's where we'll use the surface split tool, and we'll do a two-way split. And so we just click on the two objects. The two objects can be anything. It can be a solid and a surface. It can be two surfaces, two solids, whatever you got, and it'll just sort of split those two pieces. So now you can see it. We can remove or delete the bottom half of the geodesic dome, which will split with the surface. We'll delete the center section of the surface that was split from the dome, and we'll just keep these two pieces here. So we'll put a nice little transparent material onto the dome, and there we go. We have a nice little geodesic dome that matches perfectly and conforms to the curvature of that existing surface that we had in there. All right. And that's pretty much in just a few minutes, a quick a quick conceptualization of another new concept for our station. What I'd like to do is next is maybe take a few moments and look at some different ways that we can create some structural elements, maybe some framing elements to help support some of the shapes and forms that we have here. First thing we're going to do is maybe create some kind of framing elements for our geodesic dome. So let's select that, and I'm going to use the isolate feature, which is right here. I always use a key shortcut for that. I'll just show you where it's at there. And it isolates everything except for what I currently have selected. And a real fast way to frame something would be to use the frame tool. So I click on that, give it the radius that I want. And when I click on the object, it'll take the segment, every single edge that's in the object, and it'll create a tubular frame of the radius that I have set. And it'll also not only create the framing members throughout all those edges, but it'll also properly resolve the intersection of where all those edges come together to the same point. So I zoom in here, I can change the radius. We're in this orange result buffer mode, so I can change the value if I want. Maybe it's too large, too small, whatever. Change it, it'll automatically update for me. So there, so now we got a nice little quick conceptualization for the framing of that object. Now that is a true solid object, so we can still do Boolean operations and things like that on that if we want. Next, what I'd like to do is create the little connectors that will connect all these framing members together. Here's a real quick, easy way to do that in FormZ 7. Let's bring back the original dome shape that we had there. So let's unghost that dome. There we go. Bring it back. I'm going to use the isolate feature again, so we isolate everything except for just that dome. And I'm going to create a connector. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time creating a real complicated one. What I'm going to do is just quickly conceptualize something here by using the polygon tool. And of course, inside the polygon tool, there's all sorts of patterns and options we can choose to create an infinite array of different types of polygon type shapes. In this case, let's just give it, I don't know, maybe a 6-sided polygon here. All right, let's go ahead and create that, give it the radius, and we're going to reshape that up to the height that we want. So we'll take that shape and just reshape it up a couple inches. Now we have a solid object there, which will represent the placeholder for our connector. Because we can always update that later. Once we place it on there, we can always update it with a more detailed version later. And how this works is we use the place on tool, which is located right here, place on. And what we're going to do is click on our object that we want to place, and then we click on the object that we want to place it on. And there, you can see it automatically places it onto the center of each of the faces, or there's some options in the tool options here. We can place it along the midpoint of each of the segments. Let me close this palette here. Or we can also place it on the points. So it goes to the points of each one of those. Okay. And you can see we can rotate it and move it anywhere that we want on the object. Maybe move it along the X, Y, or Z direction, and have total control of the orientation of how that object is placed on that object. Okay. All right. With that, let's move that in just a little bit, right about there somewhere. All right. Get that lined up exactly the way we want. Okay. There. Perfect. Okay. Now at this point, let's go ahead and reveal the geometry that we isolated previously. So we'll use the reveal option. I always use a key shortcut, but that's where it's at. And there it is. There's a nice little geodesic dome. All right, with all the framing elements in there too. All right, let's quickly take a couple minutes and just look at maybe a couple other ways that we can quickly add some framing members or some structural support to our design that we have here. So let's begin by taking this surface object right here. We're going to isolate that so we can focus on just that part of our design. And of course, inside of Bonsai or FormZ, there's an axial sweep tool. We know how that works, right? You just simply go to your sweep tool, and we can sweep any source shape along any path. And so in this case, let's do something simple, just a simple circle, but you can draw any complex shape that you need. And then using the axial sweep tool, we can click on a source, click on the path. So I click on the edge of the object, that's our path, and you can see that that source shape follows wherever that path goes. So that's a real quick, fast way to put some structural elements in there. Now, something you can do in FormZ 7 is multi-path, multi-source sweeps. So we can actually sweep multiple sources at the same time. So for example, I'll create two different shapes, and I'm just going to draw circles here, but you can create any type of complex shape that you want, a circle, a square, whatever you want. And using the two source sweep, I'm going to click on both of the sources. And then my path is going to be maybe the edge of this object there, or any line that you draw. And we can make it faceted or smooth based on the personality that you want. And you can see how it easily transitions from the first source shape at one end into the second source shape as it goes along the path. And there's these controls which lets you control the orientation and size and scale of how each of the sources is placed on the path. And it's all done live right here in the modeling window. So you don't go into any external dialogues or anything. You can control all the orientation of the sweeping operation right here. Okay, now the next thing I want to show is, what if we have some framing members or some structural elements that are not aligned with the edges of the object? Well, here's some other ways to be able to get the profile or paths through any part of any object. For example, since we have a NURBS surface here, one of the methods we can use is go into the NURBS tools here, and you can see that we can extract NURBS curves from objects. So now you can see, if I were to click on that object, we can either extract spline curves in the U or V direction. We can give it the number that we want. We can say, we want to give it 10 in the U direction, maybe 1 in the other direction, whatever, and then move that wherever we want also, and it'll actually derive a true spline curve. And then, of course, that spline curve can then be used as the path to sweep some profiles along there to create the framing type elements. Now, what if you want to create some kind of framing element in a direction that's either not on the edge or not in the U or V direction of the NURBS surface? Well, you can have these created anywhere in any orientation that you want. Let's see how that works. Let's use the vector line tool. Let's say we want one coming from the corner here right to the middle of our geodesic dome. So I'll start with a vector line that goes from the corner point, and I'll draw it right to the center of our geodesic dome. And now there's our line that's drawn flat on the XY plane. And then we'll use our project curve tool that we used earlier, and we'll actually project that line onto the surface. And there we have another spline curve that we can sweep some profiles along to create some framing elements along that direction of the object. All right. There's also another variation of the sweep tool that I want to show real fast here in FormZ 7. That's the two-path sweep. So you can take a source shape and sweep it along multiple paths at the same time. So let's see how that works. Select our object. I'm going to go to isolate mode again. And I'm going to sweep some kind of circular shape along the top edge here, but I want to have two paths here. So let's see how we could do that. What I'm going to do is select the derived segment tool, click on the edge of my surface. Now I have a nice spline curve that matches the edge of the surface. And then I'm going to use the offset outline tool to create an offset of that line, some sort of distance here. And then using the curve tools, there are all sorts of NURBS curve tools here to be able to control the complex spline curves. One of them is the reconstruct tool. So with the NURBS reconstruct, I can increase or decrease the number of controls on the object. So maybe I'll reduce that a little bit. And I got the same curve there, just there's less controls that I'm going to use to move those around to reshape that object. So if I take a few minutes and sort of sculpt that into a different shape, I'll end up with something that looks more like this. All right, I'll fast forward here for you. And there's our two curves. Okay, so we use our two-path sweep. We select our one source shape, which is right there. And then we select our two paths. And you can see it easily scales itself as it follows both of those paths simultaneously. Now we can make it faceted, smooth. Now there is a preserve height option. You're saying, well, I don't want it flared out the bottom. So if you use the preserve height option for the two-path sweep, you can see that it'll actually keep the height of the object, of your cross section. And so if we have a 3-inch circle, then it'll keep a 3-inch thickness there, and it'll just sort of stretch it to follow both those paths, but the height of the object will be maintained. And we can actually move all the controls for the orientation of the source. We can move the controls of the paths. We can convert this into a NURBS to have controls anywhere we want on the object and move those around to then further sculpt that into pretty much any shape that we want. All right. So there, you can see in just about, we took about 10 minutes or so, we quickly conceptualized another version of our station. All right, with just a few of the new tools that are in FormZ 7. All right. Okay, now that we have the station done, we'll need some kiosk to put in there. And so we'll explore some neat little tools that we can use to create some complex shapes like what we see here. Since we're on the topic of being able to create multi-source, multi-path sweeps, we'll go ahead and look at some other additional tools that are in this suite of icons that we looked at earlier, which had the tangent loft in it. And we'll look at some other variations of that, which is really, I consider, multi-source, multi-path sweeping that even goes above and beyond the actual sweep tools. So we'll begin by creating one of the kiosks, which is just a bunch of 2D cross-section shapes, and we already know how the tangent loft works, right? You just simply hold down the shift key, pick a bunch of cross sections, and you can create a nice little tangent loft through those sources. So that's a normal lofting operation. We also use the tangent loft to create the skylight by clicking on outlines and edges of objects too. It works using both methods. But what I want to show next is the guide loft. Now the guide loft lets us actually loft just like the tangent loft, but it also allows us to use a series of guidelines so that as it's lofting, we can control the transition as it goes from one source into the other. So you can sort of think of it as a multi-source, multi-path sweeping operation with any number of sources and any number of paths. Let's see how that works. Yeah, select the guide tool, guide loft. Select all of our sources first. So I hold down the shift key, select all of our source shapes. There we go. When we're all done, let go of the shift key. And then when I click a blank area, that's the first set. And then if you ever want information of how to use the tool, just look up in the actions palette up here. Now it says pick all the guide curves. Okay, so hold on the shift key, pick all your guide curves. All right, let go of the shift key and click a blank area. And there it goes. So we picked all of our sources in the first set. We picked all our paths in the second set. And there. Now it just sort of sweeps or lofts an object conforming to not only the source shapes but also the guide paths also. We can even expand this even further. There's a multi-branch loft. This thing's pretty cool. What we can do is actually take that lofting operation and have it go in multiple directions, sort of like a tree. So we have our trunk, and then it'll actually loft in multiple directions based on our settings that we have here in our tool options. The default is it has 2 branches. Well, let's leave it at 2. And you can see we just have a couple cross sections there. So first thing I do is hold the shift key down, pick all the cross sections that represent the trunk of our loft. So there we go. Pick all those. Click a blank area to start my next set. So the next set is I hold the shift key down and pick all the sources for that next branch. Now I only have one source there. You can have as many as you want. So since I just have the one, I can click a blank area so it knows it's done with that set. Hold down the shift key to pick all the other sources in the next branch. I only have one here, and so we'll go ahead and click to finish that operation and see how it lofts from the bottom. It'll loft through those first 2, which is the trunk, and then it goes up and lofts in 2 different directions simultaneously. Sort of create a nice, neat little shape like that. All right, and since I was having some fun with that, I figured, well, I'll tell you what, since we got 2 kiosk panels on there, what if we put 4 on there? Let's see what that looks like. So I went ahead and just added 2 more shapes there, and we did a 4-branch loft. And so I hold down the shift key and pick all the ones that are the trunk, click a blank area, do all the ones for the next branch, click a blank area, click all the sources for the next branch, click a blank area. And of course, if you're clicking multiple ones, you have to hold the shift key down for multi-picking. That's pretty much standard with any of the tools inside of FormZ 7. Now with that, I selected all the sources for my trunk, selected all the sources for each of the branches, and now it'll loft that in 4 different directions simultaneously. And that's how we come up with this very interesting shape that looks like this. Now, I'm not sure how you would actually build or manufacture that, but that's another story. So, but it looks sort of cool. And the last area we'll look at is the design of the train itself. We don't have time to model the entire train. However, we do have time to highlight just a few of these really neat features in FormZ 7, such as the surface analysis tools, insert knot fastening schemes, and things like that. Let's quickly conceptualize maybe the train engine or maybe one of the train cars. And we can do that by using the NURBS lofting tool and just select a series of cross sections. And there's our NURBS surface. Now, how can we be ensured that this is a nice, smooth, aesthetically looking surface without any type of creases or kinks in it? Well, there's a surface analysis tool. Now, it's an attribute that is assigned to the object, so I can select the object. I can go into my attributes tab in the tool options here and choose the analysis option. And if that's turned on, then of course we can use any one of the analysis types to analyze the smoothness of that surface. Of course, one of them is the zebra stripes. And if you were to look at your model or your surface from different angles in real time, you can use the zebra stripes to sort of analyze and look for any type of discontinuities within those stripes that are on the surface, looking at it from different angles, and those will sort of highlight or pinpoint any areas of discontinuity that are on your surface. Okay. Some other options that we have here, if we were to look at that, we have an environment map. This is another neat way to analyze the aesthetic appearance of that surface. So let's load a different map here. Let's load any type of pixel image will work. So let's see if we can find something in here we can use, maybe a nice outdoor scene. And there we go. Now this is real-time reflections on the surface, so we can look for any type of distortions that might be appearing in those reflections on the object, and that can give us a clue or highlight some of the areas where we might have some discontinuity in that surface. And then we can move the controls around to further modify that shape to sort of clean up that object. All right, let's look at one more just for fun here. So there's the environment option, draft angle, curvature maps, normal maps. There's a whole long list of options there, and to help us analyze the actual smooth characteristics of that NURB surface that we have. All right, with that, let's turn off the analyze option there for that object. What I'd like to do is quickly show how we can conceptualize our terrain by quickly slicing in some windows or doors into the object. Now that was done by just drawing some 2D shapes and some 3D objects. And then we'll use those profiles to actually slice right through the object using the slice tool. We can actually select our object and have this profile that I drew in the side view and have it slice right through. And then we also have the surface split tool that we looked at earlier to simply take our object and we can actually split it with that solid or surface object. So you can see any type of 2D or 3D shape can be used to slice or split that object. So we can get rid of our profile that we have here. And now we took the NURB surface. Now that surface is now split into multiple pieces. We still have all of the controls there. So I can still go in and turn those controls on for any of those surfaces. Turn those on and off. And you can see I can maybe add a nice little transparency to the glass so we can see through the windows inside of our train there. All right. Now, the thing that I want to show is that now that we've done the NURBS analysis to make sure we get a smooth, aesthetic looking surface, we did the trimming and slicing, and we sort of sliced it up into multiple pieces. And if you want to make some changes, how do we make changes to that object now and maintain that nice, smooth surface that we work so hard to create? For example, let's say the front windshield here, you can see it falls a little short because of the shape that I've created. And I really want that to come back a little bit further. So how can I get rid of the window there and actually recut that in so we can keep that original shape that we have? Well, if we delete the window itself, that was actually sliced from that original NURBS. Now these are all still NURBS objects. You can see that we still have a hole in the object. And a really neat option that we have now in FormZ 7 is the ability to untrim any type of trimmed edges or openings in your NURBS surface. So I select that. Just simply click on the edge of any trimmed edge or a hole or whatever you got, and you can see it removes that, and we have the original geometry back. The original shape is there. It's always there for us. Pretty neat. Okay, so now if we wanted to, we could go ahead and maybe recarve the front window into the object. So let's split that again. And then we'll simply reapply our transparent material to that new window that we have placed in there. And now we got a better look with the window coming back up. And notice we've maintained that same shape the whole time. Okay. And speaking of maintaining that same shape, what if we do want to make some changes to that shape, but yet still keep the aesthetic appearance that we have here? And a real neat way to do that is the Insert Not tool. Now, this is not to be confused with the Insert Controls. Insert Controls allows us to put controls anywhere that we want, but when we place a control point or line anywhere that we want, it could have the tendency to slightly alter that surface because we're adding additional controls in the boundary of the controls that are already there. What the Insert Not tool does, it actually inserts a brand new set of controls, but it does not disturb the shape itself at all. So I can go in the U or V direction and notice that as I move that control back and forth, as I tell it where I want that control to be placed, it has to adjust the other controls that are surrounding that new control that I'm putting in there to maintain the exact shape of that object. So you can put controls anywhere that you want, and you don't have to worry about losing the shape that you have. Okay. That's another neat little feature in FormZ 7 there. All right, let's quickly talk about faceting schemes. If I were to pick the object, you can see underneath that, if I look in wireframe view, that there is a faceted representation of that object. And I'll show you really fast here that we have a smooth, organic, mathematical object that's good for CNC machining, whatever you want. But if you do need the polygonal part of any object, the faceted or tessellated part of that geometry, maybe for rapid prototyping, 3D printing, or any type of, or you want exports this to some sort of polygonal based model or whatever, you can see that the attributes has a display resolution option, and from there we can actually choose a scheme. And see here we can go in and choose low, medium, high. Some of these faceting schemes are already set up for you. You can create your own. For example, I can go in and create one and actually modify any of the parameters there for that. I can save my own schemes, and so we can actually set up an ultimate array of different types of faceting concepts or schemes for our smooth objects that we have. And of course, even here we have the option for no triangles and quad trees and things like that. So all the industry standard polygonal options are here for you. You can customize that any way that you want. All right, the last thing I want to quickly show here is the concept of being able to apply hatch patterns to your objects. So we have some wheels for the train here. Let's turn that assembly on. And of course, the hatch tool, which is located right here. You can see, where is it? Hatch tool, which is located right here. You can see that there's different hatch patterns that we can apply to 2D or 3D objects. Just drag and drop them on there. Now, another thing you can do is also apply hatch patterns to the cross section of the object too. So, for example, if I were to take this sidebar assembly here, and you can see that the attributes for the objects allows me to control the cross section attributes. So you can see here I can customize the color of that. I can put a hatch pattern on there, and that's applied to the object when it's being section cut. So you can either apply it directly with a hatch tool, which you see it right away, or with a cross section tool. So now you can see if I were to go in and maybe apply a clipping plane. Let's go ahead and try that. Turn on the clipping plane here. And now you can see in real time it's actually deriving that hatch pattern through the cross section of the object, because that's an attribute that's assigned to the object. And that's all done live real time. And that is all vector based, so whether it's a 2D or 3D type hatch pattern on there, do hidden line renderings, whatever you do, you will have that vector-based hatch information on the object. Okay, that's everything I wanted to show today during our presentation. You can sort of think of this as a basic introduction to creating contemporary modern type shapes in FormZ. And this is by no means all the tools in FormZ 7. This is just a small representative sampling of some of the tools for creating organic shapes in FormZ. Although the focus of our presentation was primarily the modeling aspect, so we did do some animations just to show some of the additional capabilities that are available in the program. And of course, animations is just one way that you can present your design ideas not only to your client, but also to yourself to better visualize your project and create a better design. Now, everything you see here is all modeled, rendered, and animated all within FormZ. And that concludes our presentation for today.